While guys based Hungary and Poland have refused to be cucked by the European Union and literally vetoed the EU's budget, throwing more than a spanner in the works there. They have decided to block the 7-year budget because they consider it an attack on national sovereignty, which is beyond doubt at this point. That is the EU's goal after all. Now the reason they say that is because if a nation state decides to go against the EU agenda with this new budget, they will refuse to send them money, essentially political bribery to fall in line with their plans. Which means I've got to say well done to the leaders of Poland and Hungary for saying no to this lunacy, or as they call it, political and institutionalised slavery. They are obviously bold words, but it is what the EU globalist tosspots want at the end of the day, and it won't take 3 guesses to figure out where these insane measures come from. It's none other than the likes of anti-Brexit loser Guy Verhofstadt, who did not like these populist governments from the start, because they refused to take half the world's illegal immigrants that the EU is trying to import and dump on every nation across the continent. I mean, we had Verhofstadt and the Guardian newspaper trying to claim that Poland and Hungary are performing a corrupt power grab, which is rather astonishing coming from an EU shitweasel like him. The whole EU mantra from the start has been a corrupt power grab away from the nation state to Brussels. It's so ridiculous they don't even try to deny that. You really couldn't make this shit up if you tried, it's that crazy. But thankfully Breitbart picked up on it, so let's get the full details on it, and of course a laugh at the rank hypocrisy of the EU when they don't get their own way. It headlines popular governments of Hungary and Poland veto EU's globalist power grab budget. EU member states Hungary and Poland have followed through on their threat to block the continental power bloc's 7-year budget after Brussels attempted to push it through with conditions the populist nations said were akin to political enslavement. European Union rules mean that many significant decisions, including whether to approve the bloc's 7-yearly funding programme, must be taken unanimously, with any single member state able to veto the decision. This safeguard was triggered on Monday by Conservative-led Hungary and Poland, who blocked the progress of the €1.8 trillion multi-annual financial framework as an attack on national sovereignty, which obviously it is. This is what the EU is all about. It's literally there to attack national sovereignty until it can take over, which Poland and Hungary have seen as something this financial framework plans to do. Until now, the distribution of EU funds has been based largely on economic considerations, with the poorest European states receiving the most and the richest, countries like Germany, the United Kingdom and France, paying the most. But obviously, we ain't paying into it anymore because we are off. That's if Boris Johnson doesn't sell us out anyway. It's always a possibility, as we know. Under the proposed new system, if nation states defied orders from the European Union or were judged not to be toeing the line on issues such as migrant redistribution, funding could be easily withdrawn, which is exactly why Hungary and Poland have said no, this is not going to happen. They are not going to force us into taking thousands of illegal immigrants, no fucking way. It's just a shame the UK government doesn't feel the same. Germany's Katrina Barley, who serves as the European Parliament's Vice President, summed up the intention behind the new rules succinctly when she said in October that misbehaving EU member states should be starved financially into submission, which realistically tells you all you need to know about the EU and why Poland and Hungary are correct in their actions here. Never mind anyone's hatred for the EU, this is something that cannot be allowed. While the long-debated conditions attached to the new European budget were couched in very specific and even anodyne language, characterizing the requirements as rule of law stipulations or a requirement to respect democratic norms, critics said the moves were an attempt to exert more direct political control over European nations from Brussels, which is obviously a given at this point and something we have been saying for years, which is exactly why the people of this country voted to get us out of that shit show. It continued though, speaking today, Poland's Justice Minister, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce because I will butcher it, was absolutely explicit in how the plan attacked the sovereignty of individual EU members, leaving them vulnerable to the will of other states. Deutsche Welle reports that Ziobro said the question is whether Poland will be subject to political and institutionalized enslavement. Well, apparently that is not going to happen because Poland has just said no. Hungary's Viktor Orban, for his part, said nothing is agreed on until everything is agreed on, a reference to the fact that the workings of the European Union mean Hungary was powerless to stop the new rules being added to the budget, so was left with no choice but to block the whole budget budget as is right. Hungary Today reports Orban as saying the law would lead to politically motivated financial sanctions, and that ultimately the way the EU rulings are implemented in Hungary has to be up to Hungarians and the Hungarians alone, which is obviously a given and has been true for hundreds of years now and will continue long into the future. The nation state, its laws and everything about it should be dealt with by the people there. The new conditions, which have been tirelessly promoted by hardline Euro-federalists like anti-Brexit campaigner Guy Verhofstadt, come after years of disagreement between more populist-minded European nations like Hungary and Poland and the Eurocratic elite in Brussels, which skews distinctly towards globalised multilateralism, refusal of the nations to cooperate in European Union-wide migrant resettlement programs, and defining marriage as a union between a man and a woman have caused considerable anger, because obviously Poland and Hungary are far too based for the likes of the European Union. Indeed, apparently they would probably be far too based for a lot of people in this country, but that doesn't mean they are wrong. Unless of course you are a left-wing shitweasel like Verhofstadt, who naturally has to take a shit every time someone says something he doesn't like. It goes on, a major stumbling block for the European Union in their criticism of the Hungarian and Polish governments is how popular they are in their respective home countries. Orban was an anti-communist activist when the country was still behind the Iron Curtain, and his government won a third consecutive term in a landslide election in 2018, and is among the most domestically popular governments in Europe. So yeah, that kinda naturally puts a big shitter on the European Union being able to do anything about them. The people support him, which was the case for Boris Johnson before this year. Unfortunately, Boris Johnson is a weak sack of piss, so is nothing like any of the governments we are talking about here. A similar story is true in Poland. When the ruling Law and Justice Party came to power in 2015, it had the largest mandate of any party in the country since the fall of communism, and it was re-elected last year with an even larger vote share. So like I said, the people of these countries actively support their government for doing what they want, something you will never see from the Tories, let me tell you now. Some have responded to the blocking of the budget by attacking leaders like Orban directly, including Verhofstadt, who claimed a corrupt power grab by the elected leader. That there has to be the funniest and most ridiculous thing I have ever heard in my life, especially coming from a no-good shitweasel like this little tosspot. The EU are all about corrupt power grabs, as I've said already, and as yous lot knew long before I said it. How the fuck can they come out with this shit and keep a straight face is actually beyond me. It goes on though. Britain's left-wing mainstay, The Guardian, reported similar remarks by Green MEP Rasmus Andersson, who called Poland and Hungary autocratic regimes and said they were holding Europe and COVID hostage for his failed policies. No, apparently Europe is trying to hold them hostage by trying to bribe them with this money, and saying if you don't do what we say, we won't be giving you anything. They have vetoed it, which is their right, and I'm sorry to say, is the correct thing to do. And the article finishes up there talking about Joe Biden blasting conservative governments of NATO allies Poland and Hungary as totalitarian regimes, which is likely what he would become if he was president. Thankfully, at the moment, it looks like he won't be, but anything is possible. It is 2020 after all, let's be honest. But as I've said already, well done to Hungary and Poland for vetoing this shit. Not only is it going to piss off the EU, which is always good in my books, but it also shows them that they do not have the unlimited power that they wish. These countries are not going to have it, and hopefully more start to leave the EU soon, given how much of a shit show it actually is. Places like Sweden are already seeing it and turning against the mass migration that the EU want. Italy are already the first likely to leave, among many others. Once again, like last year, we are just hoping that the EU takes a massive shit and is gone as soon as possible.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.